Good afternoon, and welcome to My World Science, where we explore how science synergizes with different elements in our lives. Knowledge is power, and we hope to inspire you to use scientific knowledge to make your life and the world around you a better place. The scientific world of movies. Stories that blend fictional plots and characters with real-world scientific knowledge. How does a filmmaker make all of this magic happen?
Well, I bet you'd like to know.
Yes. I'm Noah Kittle, and welcome to My World Science. Today, we have a really special show. To help us unravel the science of Hollywood, we welcome to our studio filmmaker Joe Dante, director of the classic film Inner Space. Inner Space is about a scientist involved in a miniature project who ends up inside the body of a stranger who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Or happened to be at the right place at the right time, if you've ever wanted to travel deep inside the human body. A man who needs no introduction, please welcome to the studio filmmaker Joe Dante. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Noah. That you sort of did introduce me anyway, but that's fine. That's okay. I can use all the introduction I can get.
So, when you started filming this movie, did you have medical personnel on set to make sure stuff is accurate?
Well, of course, we had medical personnel to consult with during the writing of the script, but when it came to actually depicting a working science lab, I don't really know what scientists do, especially in the background when they're supposed to be doing experiments and stuff. So we hired a bunch of scientists from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Whoa.
And so all the people that you see milling around in the back of the scenes are all real scientists doing real scientific-looking things. And some of them even got bumped up to have dialogue and be involved with the main characters. I think they all had a lot of fun. I think they really thought of it as a sort of a holiday. To this day, I still see some of them.
Yeah, and the movie's fun too. You can it is a comedy, isn't it?
Well, that was the intention.
Yes, it is. Okay, I just had to make sure. So I noticed that a lot of the scenes look pretty good. However, this movie was shot 30 plus years ago. How many of the internal body scenes were actually VFX or set design?
Well, there are a lot of, quote, VFX in the picture, but they're all practical effects. They're all effects that were actually done in front of the camera by the guys at ILM. They built giant pieces of the interior of Martin Short's body.
In fact, I think you have pictures of that.
We do.
Here. Yeah, whoa. That's a throat?
That's a giant throat.
A giant throat.
And in order to get it to move and do the uvula thing, you need several people to be sort of puppeteering the interior. In fact, it's probably easier to watch the trailer.
Yes, of
because
course.
then people have a better idea of what it is we're talking about.
Yeah, in fact, we have the trailer.
So let's run the trailer.
And then there's the cut.
And there's the trailer, and now we're back.
Now we're back.
Test pilot Tuck Pendleton wants to make history. Supermarket clerk Jack Putter needs a vacation.
Jack, you're late. That's not good. You know it's coupon day.
Lieutenant Pendleton is about to be miniaturized, placed into this needle, and then injected into this rabbit.
Rock and roll.
But something went wrong, and Tuck's about to get a new destination. Inside Jack Putter.
I'm in a man.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm possessed!
Now, Jack's got twice the problems,
How you doing, Jack?
but he's double the man. With Tuck on his side,
Kick more accounts.
in his gut, and on his case.
You're not gonna back groceries all your life, are you, Jack?
And only 24 hours left for Jack to get out of danger, so that Tuck can get out of Jack. Dennis Quaid, Martin Short. Give yourself a shot of adventure. Inner Space.
There, so that should give you a sort of
Yeah,
better
yeah.
idea. Now, I have to say that this trailer, while diverting, was not particularly effective in selling the movie. And the movie didn't exactly set the world on fire at the box office. But it's one of those pictures that gained a lot of traction from home video. And so
yes.
a lot of people got the VHS, and they passed it around to other people. And before you knew it, it was sort of gaining its own sort of cult following. And now there's a whole lot of people who are under the impression that this picture must have been a big hit because there's so many people who know it and remember it. But in fact, it was not a hit at the box office at all. Everybody was very disappointed, partly because of the title, which doesn't exactly tell you much.
That's true.
And the ad campaign, which was a giant thumb with a little pod on it, and no hint that it was a comedy. And they didn't sell the actors. They didn't sell the idea that it was funny. They just said, Steven Spielberg presents Inner Space. And since there was already a ride at the time at Disneyland called the Inner Space Ride, it was sponsored by Monsanto, everybody got confused as to, is this a movie about the ride at Disneyland?
Oh, no.
So it was kind of a mess. But in the intervening years, it's become quite popular.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting how it gained a cult following because people were passing the movie along on tapes.
That's happened to a number of directors of my generation who made a lot of pictures that disappointed at the box office, but were entertaining enough for people to find, even if they didn't see it initially in a theater. I'm a big proponent of seeing movies in a theater, particularly comedies. I think they're much funnier when you see them with a big audience than they are when you watch them on your computer. But because Inner Space has a funny cast and a funny script, which, by the way, started out as a straight spy movie.
Whoa.
The original version of the script that was pitched to me was a serious version of that story with no laughs.
Version.
And I said, I don't think it's going to work. And so I went off and did something else. And then when I came back, they had hired a new writer who came in with a concept. Well, what would happen if a straight man like Dean Martin was shrunken and injected into a comedy character like Jerry Lewis? And then I went, oh, okay, I get that. I can see how that would work. And then we sort of followed that with the casting of Marty Short, who had a lot of Jerry Lewis-like kind of qualities, and Dennis Quaid, who was, you know, a straight-hour hero type, but funny. And so it was a very lucky movie casting-wise because everybody in the picture gelled and they all got along great.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Let's see. So I'm sorry, I'm still just fascinated about how you were able to do all these different sets. What's that?
Well, this is a slab of Marty Short, a piece of him, because we had to build most of his body practically. And of course, in order to put our miniatures, because we had a miniature of the little pod that Dennis Quaid rides around in, and we would shoot close-ups on these things that we called them things like the river of liver and the slab of blab. And these were things that we would put outside the windows of his pod to make it look like he was moving, and they were on giant rollers, and you would just roll them past, and it would make it look like he was actually traveling. And the guys at Industrial Light and Magic, who, by the way, won an Academy Award for this picture, as close to an Academy Award as I'm ever going to get, really outdid themselves on this movie. Now, there was a prior picture with a similar plot called Fantastic Voyage that was made in the 60s. And again, almost everything was done practically on giant sound stages with people on wires, swimming through, you know, opticals and stuff, and it was fine for the day. But by the time we did this was a number of years later, and the techniques had improved. But again, you've got to remember that there's no computer animation in this picture because there was no computer animation. Everything is done practically, which means you do it in front of the camera and you fool people into thinking that what they're watching is actually real. And that usually requires building a lot of sets and miniatures. This one, for instance.
Oh yeah, I'm wondering what this is. This river?
This, for instance, is a when Dennis is swimming along in the bloodstream, and there are all these little blood platelets, these little round blood platelets.
What cells?
It's all done on a giant lucite track with water inside and a camera behind it. So it gives the illusion of actually being inside an actual vein. And when the picture came out, Roger Ebert, who was a famous critic at the time, reviewed the movie, and he said, well, you know, he noted a lot of medical footage being used in the movie. And I had to send him one of our little rubber blood cells to say, Roger, these are all fake. There's no medical footage in this movie. We created all of it ourselves. And to this day, it's pretty darn convincing.
Yeah, because nowadays I don't know if it was in the 80s. Now we can actually have...
The 80s. You make it sound like it was the 1880s.
Okay.
It's not that far away.
30 years, 40. Okay. Now in medical technology, we actually have very, very tiny cameras that we can put in pill-sized capsules and actually put through people's bodies.
Well, that's the interesting thing about this movie is it predicted the rise of nanobots.
That's pretty
and
impressive.
the villain in the movie thinks that by cornering the market on miniaturization, that he's going to be able to make a lot of money and sell it to whoever wants to buy it.
Right.
It's prescient in the sense that everything, instead of getting more complicated and bigger, everything got smaller. I mean, when I was a kid, computers used to take up huge rooms,
right,
and now they take up this, and now they take up little spaces. You have thumb drives. You put all this stuff on a thumb drive. I mean, when we made this movie, we didn't even conceive of those things. Right. So the trick is when you're making a science fiction movie, you have to try to use the existing science, and you have to prognosticate what you think might be coming in the future. And a lot of science fiction movies have gotten the future right, but they've almost always missed the computerization of it. They've almost missed the idea that there were going to be computers and people were going to be able to talk to each other on them. Because our society is so completely different than it was when I was a kid, largely because of science. And I grew up in the 50s where science was the future. Science was what everybody was looking forward to. Everybody was excited. It was going to be like the Jetsons, and there was going to be moving sidewalks, and there was going to be flying cars, and robot housekeepers, and all this stuff. And we didn't get the flying cars, unfortunately, as the traffic in LA will show you. But the robot housekeepers may be coming.
We're getting there. Japan actually has some
I think
prototypes.
We're coming for that, and we're slowly going into the kind of future that we all thought we were going to get, but it didn't come as quickly as we thought it was going to.
That's right. Man, was this colored red? All the fluid in there?
All the fluid was reddish, yes.
Reddish, okay.
It was bloody reddish.
And the red blood cells that you had were?
They were round, like little Cheerios, and they were rubber around little holes. And when you put them together in the swim of the liquid, it made it look like it was. It did. I must say, to Roger's credit, it did look like medical.
That's
footage.
amazing, especially since at the time, did they even have medical footage?
I don't know. I don't know that they had an ability to photograph that kind of miniature detail at the time. But it was probably possible in a high-end setup, but it wasn't something that your average patient was going to be able to take advantage of.
It's pretty astonishing how a lot of the movie was able to look so real, even though there wasn't that much footage and pictures of that tiny scale, right?
No, but there were a lot of medical books. I mean, the reason I didn't become a doctor was because my parents bought me a medical book, and it was one of those books with the pages that you turn over, and they're sort of transparent, and you can see intestines, then you turn it over and you can see livers and stuff. And it was also gross and disgusting. I figured, I can't do this. I can't be a doctor. This is...
Well, here you are, a doctor for one
Well,
movie.
yeah. I mean, so I did manage to get my science chops in here a little bit. Let's see, what's this one?
Oh yeah, this is the fat cells.
Yes, these are fat cells. Now these are actually, I'm not sure they're balloons, but they're like balloons. They're certainly rubber, and
they're like silicone
full of yellow
balls.
liquid. Yeah, silicone balls. And at one point, he wakes up inside his new host, and his pod is sitting in fat cells, which he identifies as fat cells. And then.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Is this maybe the ear?
This is the ear. I think this could be the ear. At one point, the pod goes inside his ear, and we built a lot of ear canals. Not Erie canals, but ear canals.
Built a lot of ear canals.
And then at one point, he goes inside Meg Ryan. He switches. Marty Short kisses Meg Ryan, and Dennis Quaid, through his saliva, goes into her body and discovers that she's pregnant. And so we built a 2001-like
Wow.
baby, giant baby, which was quite something to see, and it was pretty large. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
was
is.
really big. I don't know what happened to it, but it's probably outside
It's
some
pretty impressive to see
Planned
that in the
Parenthood
movie.
kid clinic. Now this.
Ah, yeah, this scene.
Okay.
Right.
There's a section at the end of the movie where the bad guys. This is a pretty silly movie, so it's kind of hard to justify. But the bad guys get shrunken down themselves.
But only
And
to halfway.
To halfway, and so they're 50% big, and they end up in the back of a car, driven by our hero and heroine. Now, in order to establish this, without actually being able to really shrink our actors,
Of course.
we set it up on a nodal point, which is where if the camera has one spot, it will fool itself into thinking that anything that it's in front of the camera, depending on what size it is, has a relationship that is sorted out in your brain a little differently. And so you'll buy the fact that what you're watching is actually all on one flat plane, whereas in fact, this is a regular car front. The back seat is quadruple size.
Quadruple.
The actors in the back seat are normal size, but when they're so far away, they become smaller.
Yeah.
And so therefore they look like they're miniatures. And then the trick is to try to make it look like the real actors in miniature can interact with the big actors. And the only way you could do that is with clever cutting and the use of puppets.
That's right. Yeah. There's puppets. Because, of course,
And so
once they
here,
touch
right.
each other.
So here we have Meg Ryan getting ready to have a battle with the puppet of Fiona Lewis, who is the bad person. And that's her fuzzy hair. And at one point, she's pulling Meg's hair, but she's really a puppet. And there it is again. It's a little easier to see the puppet. This sequence took a week
Whoa.
to shoot, and it's in the movie for, I don't know, 5 minutes.
A minute?
You know,
Okay,
no,
5
a little more
minutes.
than that because it's got a car chase around it. But,
Yeah.
but it was quite a triumph actually, and I think it's probably the main reason why Dennis Muren, who was the main effects guy, got his Oscar, was because this was really, really cleverly done.
Yeah. It's pretty, like I said before, this is an amazing feat of a movie. Oh, yes, here we see, are those life-size dolls?
So here are the real people, and these are
sorry.
these are the little dolls, and there's the camera. So the doll is going to go up and reach and pull her hair, and maybe even be thrown over the seat. I can't remember.
I believe I saw real-life dolls.
And there is a giant
Yeah.
Meg Ryan head, which is which needs to be this big in order to make Fiona Lewis look this small.
Right. They had to construct a big car and a big doll.
We had big, and we had little on everything. And the trick was making sure that you could put it all together in a way that looked like it made some sort of sense to your mind when you watched it.
Right.
It was really one of the most fun movies I ever made because we made it in a lot of it in San Francisco, which is a wonderful town to shoot film in. And it was done at Warner Brothers for Amblin, which was a great place to work because they were filmmaker friendly. And except for the fact that it didn't make a lot of money, everybody was very pleased with it.
All right.
And
That's
so,
always good.
And so to this day, we all are kind of proud of it.
Before you started working on the movie, did you happen to have parts of the body in your mind that you really wanted to get shot, or was it kind of just all like up to the writer?
Well, no, it wasn't that I had this crying need to go inside, the heart, or to show something about it. But having seen Fantastic Voyage, I knew what worked and what didn't work.
Ah, okay.
And what was easier to do and what was harder to do. And so we tried to stick to the things that we could do well. And after our first preview, Steven Spielberg decided that we needed an extra action scene, and that's when we came up with the idea of Dennis Quaid being sucked into the heart. There's a scene where we see the heart, and it's flapping and it's pulling liquid in, and of course it's pulling his pod in, and so he takes out his laser, and in a scene that still makes me wince, he cuts the side of the vein and goes through so that he doesn't have to go into the heart.
Right.
And it just seems to me that if you ever thought you were having a heart attack and it turned out to be Dennis Quaid inside with a laser, I guess you'd be relieved. I don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of that laser, it's earlier in the movie, the scientist or somebody says how it's a helium neon laser. That is a real thing. That is one of the materials that lasers can be produced from. And I guess what he's doing multiple times, or probably like maybe twice in the movie, where he cuts blood cells, blood vessels. I guess he's performing microsurgery.
Yes,
That's
exactly what he's doing.
Making extremely tiny cuts. I mean, albeit to make holes.
Well, they look pretty big on the screen, but they're actually pretty small.
Oh yeah, they are small because he's like 10 times the size of a blood cell. And when you see in those scenes,
Right, and of course the gimmick in the movie is that he's running out of air, and so he's got to get out before he runs out of oxygen inside his little pod, and that's where the suspense comes in.
One idea that I did have during the movie was like, well, what if he were to like refill his tanks in the lungs or something?
Well, that's what they do in the movie. They do. They say, why don't you go down in the lungs and refill your tanks? And isn't there a reason why he can't do that?
Yeah, the guy says that because of the pressure difference, if he attempts to do that, he'll implode or explode, whichever one. Yeah. Unfortunate.
You don't want to have to go through what he's going through.
Nobody does. Let's see. Right. I took my own pictures of parts of the movie that I wanted to ask you about.
Oh.
So this is the very beginning. This is before you see any people. The beginning
I
credits.
wondered why I couldn't make anything out of it.
Yeah. This is a shot of, it looks like a bunch of crystals, and eventually they zoom out, and it turns out to just be a glass of ice, and they're filling like whiskey or bourbon in it. But of course, in the credits scene, it's moving, the camera's panning around, you're getting all the credits. Do you have any idea of like how they did that?
Well, we needed a really good title sequence for the movie, and because it starts out with Dennis Quaid gets drunk at a function and makes a fool of himself and everything, and it's all character building, but there's no science fiction in that part of it. Right. But we thought I want to start this movie off different, in a way that still is true to the movie. We went to a guy who has recently passed away named Wayne Fitzgerald, who was a specialist in doing opening titles for movies.
Oh.
And he came up with the idea of what if we think that we're inside some strange crystal or some strange world that we don't know what it is, and then as we pull back, we realize slowly that we're actually in a glass of ice cubes, and then the ice cubes get picked up.
Exactly.
And he was this is the only film that Wayne ever did with me, but he's done many famous title sequences. If you look him up on IMDb, he's really one of the best.
And I kind of like, now that you tell me how it's them being in a strange world and then panning out and it's just ice, that kind of helps with the theme of the movie where you're miniaturized, you're in a very strange world, but it's only a strange world because you're tiny. And then once you zoom out, you realize that it's everything that we recognize it to be. It's just ice.
Yep.
Another scene that comes shortly afterwards is when the lab is getting raided by the bad guys, and a bunch of people are getting sprayed by whatever. I would hope so that on set they were spraying with probably water.
Then we probably had money for water. Yeah. I'm actually in that scene.
That's right. Yeah, you're the first person.
I'm the first person who gets sprayed.
The first person that gets sprayed.
I'm embarrassed to say it took 3 takes for me to do it right, and all I had to do was fall down. But that's why I'm not. That's why I'm not in front of the camera. That's why I'm behind the camera.
Yes, of course. Do you have any idea if like that kind of chemical exists? Probably.
Well, this is a kind of a screenwriter's conceit. I mean, there probably are things in aerosol cans that you can knock people out with. But this is sort of your standard spy movie kind of bit.
Exactly.
I mean, you basically want to get those people in there because they want to steal the chips.
And they're not killing everybody, which is
which is nice. But it's a Spielberg movie. You don't want to kill everybody. So much for that story.
Yes, this is the laser cutting open the blood vessel. I guess I kind of mentioned it earlier, but yes, he is performing a microsurgery, which we can actually do that now.
Yeah.
And that's pretty darn impressive.
Costs a lot of money, though.
Yeah.
Everything costs a lot of money.
Everything does. And yeah, this is just another picture of him entering the blood vessel. Of course, because all the blood cells are moving very quickly, it's blurry.
Yeah, it looks better in motion.
It does look way better in motion. And it looks so real, too, because it is real.
That's right.
That's the brilliance of this movie.
I suggest you run right out and get a copy.
It's actually just like the dynamic between Jurassic Park versus Jurassic World, the recent movie, because Jurassic Park actually used a bunch of dino puppets, and in that sense, it actually made the movie feel more real, especially since the actors, since they were able to see the dinosaurs, they could better act fear against it, whereas Jurassic World, because it was all animated.
Well, that's
there's
my
nothing
belief.
there.
I mean, I've done a lot of these pictures, and I've seen the new technologies come in, and I am a firm believer in having as much on the set as you possibly can, because it's better for the actors.
Yes.
If the actors in Gremlins had to react to Gremlins that weren't there and were
Right.
put in later, I mean, actors are good. They can make it look okay, but it isn't the same as bonding with an actual event that's
Exactly.
taking place in your surroundings. And there's a scene in Gremlins where Corey Feldman talks to Gizmo on the bed, and he talks to him like he's a puppy. And it's a very convincing, believable scene because there was something to react to.
Right.
You know, whereas if you do the same thing and you just say, just look over there where the X is, you just don't get
No.
quite the same reaction. And I agree about the use of practical effects in Jurassic Park. I think the fact that they intended to use a lot more practical effects than they did, because as they were developing the movie, they discovered that what they could do with the CGI, and they said, well, maybe we'll do this part with CGI, maybe we'll do that part with CGI. I had the same experience myself on Small Soldiers, where we were
Oh, yeah.
originally going to make the movie with all puppets and very, very little CGI. And as it turned out, the puppets became very difficult to manage and difficult to hide the puppeteers, and the CGI, which was just burgeoning along at the time, was very useful, particularly for toys which don't have to move smoothly.
You're right, because plastic.
Yeah, so it didn't matter if they were a little jerky because they were supposed to be. So we ended up a lot of times just saying, okay, just shoot the plate, shoot the background, we'll put the puppet in later. And it worked out fine. But in watching, well, that's one of the reasons why I continued to do commercials for a while, is to just keep up with the technology, because the technology changes immensely. And the technology that is used to make movies now versus 1975 when I made my first movie, it's almost a different art. It's just completely different.
Let's see, I had 2 more slides. Right. This is the scene where he's about to go inside Jack's stomach. And I kind of noticed immediately that it looked like the ocean. And I was wondering if it was in fact the ocean.
No, it was not actually the ocean. It was actually created at ILM from oatmeal or whatever they were using.
Oatmeal?
But because Marty is a hypochondriac, he's got stomach acid.
Okay.
And in the end, the stomach acid is useful in vaporizing one of the bad guys. One of
Exactly.
the main bad guys ends up being eaten by stomach acid. And for those of you who have stomach acid, you know exactly how that feels.
Yeah, let's see. And there it is. There's the end of the
It must be
slideshow.
My World Science.
It must be. Anyway, I think it is a really great place to end it off, especially when we were talking about the visual effects and how practical effects actually look better than.
Well, I mean,
VFX
I'm sure it's a matter of taste to some degree, but
Yes.
but I just think it's more satisfying for me as a filmmaker to be able to manipulate something when I'm there, as opposed to saying,
Exactly.
let's give it to that guy in the corner with the computer, and then we'll come back in an hour and see what he's done with it. That's a little more collaborative than I'd really rather
Exactly.
like
Yeah,
to be.
it's much more collaborative if you can really be one with the.
Yeah, I mean,
effects.
you just have a handle on it, you know. But nonetheless, I mean, look, there's some amazing things being done on film that we could only imagine before, and movies are all the better for it.
One last question here. I would like to know, how does someone know when a script is done and ready to start the filming and producing process?
Well, you know, if it depends on if you're developing a script with the studio, then you have a lot of people telling you what they think, and also if you have a deadline, you've got to shoot this by then that tells you, okay, you can't write anymore.
Right.
You got to start shooting, and then you can still continue writing while you're shooting. But basically, a script is really never done, because a movie is made 3 times. It's made when it's written, it's made when it's shot, and it's made when it's edited.
Ah, okay.
And so each time there's a possibility that the movie is going to change into something while you're doing it. And it's going to not be exactly what was intended, it's going to be something slightly different. And what you have to do is you have to perfect the part that's the good part. You have to perfect the movie that you're making and go with what it's becoming. And so you can always present it at its best. So for me, I think a script that's only 2/3 there is still worth shooting because you have the ability to make changes and stuff. But,
I see.
But it's gotta be on the page or it ain't on the stage.
Right.
Is what they say.
On the page, or basically deadlines have to be made, I guess.
Yes, unfortunately it's a business.
Thank you for joining us on this very special episode of My World Science. Thank you, Joe Dante, for being here today. It was quite an honor to have you here.
It was
so
an honor
much
being
fun.
had. Thank you.
It was so much fun to talk about inner space and the science of movie making. If you would like to see more of our content, please check us out on Twitter and Instagram at MyWorldScience. Until next time, think inquisitively.